Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris and each week I'm joined by Husky Harry, huggable homos who love film, to dish up some movie news sometimes, although this week the show's a little hyper-loaded, so we're going to skip movie news this time. And of course, we love to review films, either current or classic. We've been very heavy on the current lately, so we're going to have to get a classic one in soon, I think. But we're very excited to talk to you guys this week about Wonder Woman, the newest film entry in the DC Universe film franchise. But before we do that, let me introduce my wonderful co-host, Jim Pugliafico, is here with me at my side. We're doing it together again this week because it was so much fun last week. But hello, Jim.
It's like I'm really with you this time.
It almost is like I can reach out and touch you. Hello.
Yeah, you've been touching me the whole time.
Well, under the table. Yeah. That's true.
Hello, welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And of course, Will Lindis is with us as well. Unfortunately, he is not with us in person in Tucson this week. He went home, but Will is joining us remotely. Hey, Will, how are you?
Hey, I enjoy doing the in-person recordings. We only get to do them like once or twice a year, but I value them quite a bit. But hey, show must go on. Loving being here with you guys, our guests, and all of our listeners today.
All right, excellent. And speaking of guests, we'd be remiss if we didn't introduce you to them as well. We are very excited to welcome back some of the guys from the Comic Book Bears podcast. Please welcome Bill. Say hi, Bill.
Hi, everybody.
And of course, Steve as well. Welcome, Steve.
Hello.
All right. Well, glad to have you guys. We've had a lot of new listeners coming on board lately, which we're very thankful for. So hello, new listeners. Glad to have you. But we'd love to give you guys a little bit of a chance to tell our new listeners, Bill and Steve, about your show. Why are you guesting on this podcast with us this week? Why are you relevant? Defend yourself. Go.
Okay, well, Steve and myself are one half of the hosting contingent of the Comic Book Bears podcast. We've been active as a podcast since 2011, and we are a group of hairy, heavy homos like yourselves who are into comic books and talk about them, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in.
Yeah, that's right. We actually, we talk about comics. We talk about TV shows that are related to comics. We talk about movies that are based on comics. We talk about things that we got swag at local cons that are related to comics. Basically anything that's nerdy and comics adjacent sort of ends up on our show as well. We do welcome all sorts of listeners. If you don't have a huge comic background, if you listen to us, hopefully you'll learn something and maybe get some encouragement or recommendations that will have you go out and try something new.
So one thing I got to say about your guys' show is I like comics. I read some comics. Like I'm pretty current on my favorite titles with the DC Rebirth thing. But you guys know so much more about comics than I do. So when I first found out about your show, I was like, I'm never going to listen because they're going to talk at a level that I'm just not at. But then I did listen. And what's really cool about you guys is even though you guys have all this knowledge, you make the conversations really fun and it's approachable by the average comic knowledge person. So great show. We're very excited to have you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, there's an old adage. There's an old adage within the comic book industry that every comic is somebody's first comic. And I think we've adapted that to our show that, everybody's, this might be your first comic book podcast that you're listening to. And I think unconsciously or consciously, we've always kind of operated under that assumption.
Well, it's a good assumption. It makes for a great show. So listeners, whether you are new to our show or not, definitely be sure to check out the Comic Book Bears podcast. We have a lot to discuss this week with Wonder Woman, kind of a big meaty discussion. And, there's 5 of us, right? Did I do the math right? 1, 2,
We've
4.
got a big meaty show.
Yeah, we do. And all these like heavy huggable homos and all this meat talk is getting me a little amped up. So I do want to say hi real quick to our listeners who are with us in the live chat. So Weeping Jay and William and everyone else who's in there with us right now, hey, glad to have you guys with us. Make sure to drop your thoughts into the live chat on Wonder Woman or whatever we're blathering on about at the time. And as long as we can say it on air, we'll be happy to give you a shout out. But guys, what do you think? Are you ready to get our Amazonian talk of Wonder Woman-ness on?
Sure. Now,
Yeah,
the thing
of
I have to
course.
ask, now, Brad, I see Wonder Woman on your shirt.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only shirt I have with Wonder Woman on it, if you can see with the gray
Oh, nice.
there.
The
So,
ladies. The
so is
DC
everybody
ladies.
dressed for the part? Everybody dressed? I mean, I think there's some bracelets. There we go, Steve.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have Wonder Woman on my shirt, but 94 is kind of like my grade for the movie. So
Okay.
Very nice. Very nice. I have no Wonder Woman paraphernalia, so I'm just rocking a red
Well,
shirt
okay.
tonight.
So here's the thing. So I've got my shirt, of course, but I've got three
Mhm.
things to make up for Jim and Will. So I've got my version of Wonder Woman's gauntlets,
mhm.
and I've got something else, which I'll bring out a little bit later. So Jim, Will, you're
Okay.
covered. It's all right. We got you.
Nice.
Okay. Now, as you can see here, due to the shitty lighting, I am talking to you from a Marriott Courtyard, so on the road for work, and I couldn't go all out, but I will at least.
Nice.
Oh, I love
That's the way you do it.
Love it.
Rocking the Wonder Tiara.
That's going to be the screenshot of the show. It's got to be the thumbnail on YouTube when you go to watch this.
That looks like a pretty authentic replica from season 1 of the TV show, actually.
Yeah.
Probably also made of plastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, hers I think was like cardboard with some like gold leaf tinfoil or something. Like that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of disappointed you didn't spin around first.
Right?
I
You need to do like a little twirl.
know it's hard when you're wired. Yeah.
Well, the chair.
Yes.
Nice.
That work? Okay.
That's what spinning chairs are
Perfect.
made for hotel room Wonder Woman transformations.
That's what they're for. Exactly.
So some of the folks in the live chat are asking, what is with the light ghost on Jim's face?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
I've noticed it too, and I don't know. It's just a reflection, and it's actually coming off the camera. So it'll be. I bet you it'll be gone in 10 minutes.
It's coming off the camera.
Leave
Is
it alone. Don't touch it. Don't.
I'm trying to figure out where it's. Okay,
Yeah, put
I
your hand
see. I
behind
see
it.
what it
Jim,
is.
what is that mysterious white smudge on your face?
Okay, so let me set the scene for you. In fact, we're just going to do this. We're podcasting from our dining room, and there's an open door with an open curtain, which we could probably close, and it might help. But the light is coming from that off of something else and like reflecting on his face. So
It's all right. It's
anyway,
okay.
we'll make do.
While the spotlight's on me, I probably should do my part.
You probably should. But before we do that, let me just say this to folks who are new or may not be familiar with the format of the show for some reason. We're going to talk about Wonder Woman completely spoiler-free for probably, with 5 of us, 20, 25 minutes or so before we go into Spoiler Pound Town. I was trying to think of like a Wonder Woman-related way to say that, but whatever. In any event, we'll give you plenty of warning before we go into spoilers. So if for some reason you haven't seen Wonder Woman yet, no worries. You can hear our initial impressions spoiler-free without having to step away, and then we'll give you a heads up. But all of that said, are you guys ready to talk Wonder Woman?
All set.
I'm ready.
All right.
Truth be told, I'm ready.
Bill's got his tiara on, so that means it is time for action. So here we go. Our discussion of Wonder Woman. All right. So, Jim, why don't you kick things off for us? Give us a little bit of the setup for Wonder Woman, your initial thoughts, whether you think it's worth checking out in theaters, maybe waiting for rental, or skipping entirely. What do you think?
Well, it's always daunting coming on the show with you guys and introducing a comic book film because of everybody here, I'm probably the one that knows the least about comics in general, and certainly, Wonder Woman lore and backstory, at least as much as you guys know. So I'll do my best, and then I'm sure you guys will probably throw in your corrections kind of after I set it up. How's that?
Sounds good.
Sound good? All right.
Sure.
So I'm going to read a little synopsis of the movie. I guess we'll have to see if this is going to be a groundbreaking movie or not, right? Whether we can call it that. I think in at least a couple aspects it's going to be, right?
Yeah, sure. You told me not to talk while you were talking.
That's what
so I'm like,
I did.
All about. Yeah.
I told you not. No,
you were like, save your comments and corrections till after I talk. So I'm like, I'll just be quiet.
Speak only when spoken to, right?
Spoken like a true Amazon.
Right. Anyway, before she was Wonder Woman, she was Diana, Princess of the Amazons. She was raised in a mysterious island paradise of Themyscira. Yes. And trained to be an unconquerable warrior. Diana meets an American pilot, played by Chris Pine, who tells her about the massive conflict, which is World War I, that's raging in the outside world. Convinced that she could stop the threat, Diana leaves her home for the first time, fighting alongside men in, quote, the war to end all wars. She finally discovers her full powers and true destiny. This one stars Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, which I did not mention. Directed by Patty Jenkins, who directed a movie that I really loved from a long time ago called Monster. If you guys have ever seen that movie, the Eileen Wuornos movie with Charlize Theron, really great movie. And then she went into some TV work, a whole bunch of TV work. She was interesting enough, she was originally tagged to do the second Thor movie. I think the Thor, I forget what that one was ended up being called.
Was it Thorable? Because that's what I thought of it.
Well, it wasn't that great. But she was originally tagged to do that movie, and then she left that movie over creative differences. And then she worked at TV shows, and then she took this Wonder Woman job, which was ironically also vacated by another female director, Michelle McLaren, who was originally named to do this movie. So kind of a tumultuous start to the Wonder Woman movie. I think maybe DC just wanted to get the right chemistry going there. But this one, like a lot of the DC movies, is written and I think produced by Zack Snyder, also written by a couple of other guys, Alan Heinberg, who wrote a bunch of TV, including an episode of Looking, which some of us have seen. Before we get into the origin story of Diana that's in the movie, I wanted to talk about kind of the bigger picture about this movie. And first of all, I'll just say that I did really like this movie a lot, and I was really pleased with how it seems like DC's finally getting their act together, at least with this movie. We'll see. One is maybe a little. The last couple of DC movies have not been great, right? We had Suicide Squad. Mm-hmm. Was that the last one we had? And before that, was it Batman versus Superman, which was mixed, I would say, reception. But ironically, it's taken a female director to bring kind of this universe back to life, in the movies. And I think that's a really great thing. I'm going to say that, like I said, I really like this movie. It's what did I like about it? I loved a lot about it, and not just that it's female led and it's, female directed. I just love the story in this. I like the fact that we have a DC movie that I think kind of nailed the ending of the movie, which we'll talk about a lot of the plot points. I just love the feeling that I had coming out of this movie compared to the other movies. The other, not just DC movies, but also some of the Marvel movies that we've had lately. I think it's a different flavor than the Wonder Woman that we've seen in the TV series, but I think they retained enough of that Wonder Woman story and the Wonder Woman kind of ethos in this to make it really interesting. Gal Gadot's very good. For me, she'll never replace Linda Carter, and she lacks some things that I think Linda Carter brought to Wonder Woman, but I think she's probably the right actor for what we need Wonder Woman to be today. Kind of what we need for a modern female superhero. All I'll say is, yeah, I enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend this movie. I think, not being a big superhero movie fan, it's hard for me to say I love this film because it didn't like surpass a lot of my overall movie expectations, but in terms of the way superhero movies have been going lately, I think this definitely set some things right with me. So I did like this movie. It's got some flaws. We'll talk about those in spoilers, but I'm going to let you guys talk now.
All right. Awesome. So definitely recommend for you, Jim.
Yeah.
It sounds like excellent. Now we're going to switch things up a little bit and hand it over to one of the comic book bears because you guys do have a lot more knowledge, I think, than at least Jim and I do, especially regarding Wonder Woman. So, Bill, would love to hear from you first. What did you think of this film?
Okay, there's my audio. Sorry, I had to turn off the mic. For quite some time, I have had an image of one of the promo images of the film as my cover page for Facebook, with the caption "Please don't suck," because I am a huge DC Comics fan, and I have been substantially let down by the three films that they've had prior to this in the DC Extended Universe. I usually don't go all out for films, but for this one, we did IMAX. We had reserved seats. We had breakfast brought to us in the theater.
Wow.
We went all out. I enjoyed this movie so much that my partner and I ended up sneaking into a second screening right after the first one. I will agree with you, Jim. There are flaws, just like there are in any superhero film. We haven't had that shining example yet. We haven't had the Citizen Kane of superhero films yet. But and again, it's very hard to talk about this film without spoilers. But you have a female lead who has so much charm and hits so many of the right marks. One thing that is an element of the movie is that Diana, within the second, third act, is a stranger in a strange land. And she nails that perfectly. It's never over the top. What you see in this movie is not a well-directed action film by a female director. You have a well-directed action film by a director who knows how to direct action. A friend of mine in a conversation today said there's one particular scene where Wonder Woman is advancing, and she said, I didn't know I needed to see that my entire life. I didn't know that was an image. I'm getting emotional here because I love when movies inspire, and I think the biggest problem with the DC movies so far, even if they do have their merits, is they have been so lacking in joy and hope. And to have something like this where, when I do the math, I've been waiting since 1973 for this film. I've been waiting for a cinematic interpretation of this character that had merit and worked, and I'm glad I got that in my lifetime. And I thought the supporting cast was wonderful. Some of my favorite moments and the moments that gave me the feels were these little moments, which I can't wait to talk about to see if you guys are in agreement with me. Mm-hmm. But it works as a war film. It works as a character study. It works as a love story. It works on so many different levels, and it treats them all. Oh God, there's New Jersey when I'm down to say that. It treats them all with so much, with so much accuracy, and how to deal with these subjects. I think there are some times where you have a film that is so loaded with those kind of elements that it doesn't know what kind of movie it needs to be. This movie knew it needed to be all those types of films, and somehow it managed it. It pulled it off. I thought it was wonderful.
Did you say wonderful? Because
yes,
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, wonderful. Yeah,
I figured
like that. Look what I did. Look at
so
look
definitely.
Definitely see it in theaters. If just for the scenes on Paradise Island and at the front, at least 3D, if not IMAX. I think this really is, as somebody who has already seen it in an enhanced and in a 2D version, I think there are some takeaways from a 3D visual to this film that it's worth it for you to pay the extra few bucks.
All right, awesome. So two big recommends at this point. I'll kind of go in the middle here, and then we'll see how the other side falls out. I gotta say, going into this movie, Bill, you mentioned the whole like "don't suck" thing, and I was pretty much in that headspace too, because I have not been a big fan of the Zack Snyder Superman movie and Batman v Superman. I mean, we talked about that a lot. And so going into this film and just kind of like, God, Wonder Woman, a character I love so much, like, I just don't want to see her given that sort of same treatment. And I'm very happy to say that even though, still written, produced, whatever, by Zack Snyder, this movie, I mean, it shares some of the tonal feel to some degree, but it brings some of that like light and hope and heart that I would expect from Wonder Woman, that I was a little afraid wouldn't be here. Obviously, it's very toned down from like the Linda Carter 1975, Wonder Woman. But I mean, reading a lot of the DC New 52 and now Rebirth Wonder Woman titles, I mean, it feels very just synchronous with that. Like, I feel like I'm reading that same character on the page that I'm watching on the movie, and vice versa. And I'm not a comic expert, but I will tell you, it's enjoyable for me when I feel like even if the movie universe plot-wise isn't connected to the plot of like the comic universe, if they feel sort of like tonally synchronous, it makes it feel like a cohesive experience as opposed to like just something intermittent or broken into little bits. So I like that a lot. I would say, the cast is fantastic. Even some of the supporting cast of characters, some of the minor compatriots that come along for the World War I adventure, they all had a part to play. And something that really was great for me with this movie is it brought in some fun. And I'm not talking about like, Marvel movie quippiness. I just mean like fun between the characters and their interactions and how they respond to certain things. It kind of felt a little realistic to me, like how when I'm hanging out with a group of friends or podcasting with a group of friends, you kind of riff off each other and laugh, and it felt kind of natural to me. So Wonder Woman with an ensemble cast, I was like, God, I hope she doesn't get swallowed up by that cast, a cast of all men telling her what to do. And I'm also very happy to say, she really stands out on her own. There's a little bit of that, and maybe it's intentional. We'll talk more about it in spoilers, I think, where she kind of like steps out and does her own thing. And I think it's fantastic for sort of combating that attitude. So this is a big old hearty recommend for me as well. I won't talk much more because we still got two other guys to go to, but definitely go see it. Steve, how about you? How do you come down on Wonder Woman?
Oh, it was terrible. No, I have to, yeah. No, very similar to Bill. Since I was a kid, I've always wanted to see Wonder Woman on the big screen. And, I grew up with like the TV show, the Linda Carter TV show from the 70s and reruns, and, Super Friends and a couple other, cartoon versions of her, and very campy versions of her. But I almost had resigned myself to not being able to see a proper, serious, big screen version of Wonder Woman until Batman versus Superman. At that point, as soon as that electric violin just comes screaming out of the speakers in the theater, and Wonder Woman just jumps down, I knew that this could happen. And, I still had to wait another 2 years for the actual film itself. And I have to say, like Bill, I kind of had that thought in the back of my head, don't suck, please don't suck. Seeing Gal Gadot in costume, knowing what Patty Jenkins had done in previous, in Monster especially, I knew that she understood how to, how to show a woman, how to direct a woman and a woman-centered film. And so I knew it was going to be good. But I wasn't prepared for how good. And I'm not going to tear up like Bill, but which was wonderful.
Just you.
It's okay, Steve. You're with friends.
Oh yeah, no.
We'll all be crying by the
movie
end of this
theater.
podcast.
I have to say, sitting there, I sat there, with my boyfriend, with my husband on one side, and
your boyfriend on the other.
The boyfriend
Hell of a
on the
screening.
other side. But being there with my husband and getting to see this film, and just the amount of joy that was being presented to us from the screen, but also from the audience. I don't think there was one person in that movie theater and we saw the IMAX 3D, I don't think there was one person who was not just entranced by what they were seeing on the screen. And, for whatever small parts that disappointed some people, and I know some people didn't really enjoy this movie, I don't know what they were watching. From the moment that it started, and we got to see a lot of beautiful imagery. I apologize.
That's all right. No worries.
But from the very moment when we got to see just Gal Gadot looking at that beautiful plate photograph that we saw in Batman v Superman, and then of course going into her childhood in Themyscira, Paradise Island, it just was just one wonderful just deep breath after another of just like that's what I wanted to see. That's what I wanted to see. Oh my gosh, it's still going. It's still good.
What comes next? Yeah.
What's next? I want to see what's next. And there were plenty of moments where I teared up, where the emotion really hit me. And there were even scenes where they weren't necessarily hugely emotional, but I think that they just really, the fact that I was seeing it on the big screen and seeing it done so, remarkably well, was just, to me, just a huge impact. And so, the story was great, and I guess you could kind of say almost by the numbers in terms of superhero films that we've come to expect. The hero's journey and the development of, whatever from naive to experience to understanding, whatever, and even some of the action scenes, which we'll talk about in spoilers, but I mean there was stuff in here that wasn't a surprise. I mean, we've come to expect them from both the Marvel and the DC films. But just the fact that it was Wonder Woman and the fact that it was done well, and Gal Gadot is just marvelous in this role. And even some of the supporting cast, Chris Pine as Steve Trevor, was great. I mean, he was great. Lucy Davis as Etta Candy. She was just, I wanted more of her. I could watch an entire, DVD full of, or Blu-ray full of extras with just her just going around doing things just little things there. But and I'll mention something in spoilers as well. Kind of and Brad alluded this to, the way that some of the characters would talk to each other. I thought it was just wonderfully done. So, another recommend for me, I guess. Recommend.
I'd say that's a recommend.
Please go see a lot. I have plans to go see this tomorrow and probably 3 more times in the next couple of weeks.
Nice. All right. Well, we've got 4 recommends in a row. Will, not to put any pressure on you, but definitely get your thoughts in order. Just a second before we have you go, though, to you folks in our live chat, we'd love to know what you thought of the film. So feel free, jump into that live chat. Let us know what you thought about Wonder Woman, and we'll be happy to share some of your comments on air. But Will, while they do that, what did you think?
Yeah, so I've made it no big secret that the last few of the DC movies have not connected at all for me. I considered Suicide Squad to probably be the least effective film that I saw last year. Total, period. That's the end of that sentence. And Batman v Superman was almost all fault for me, save for that amazing Wonder Woman scene that was the shining beacon of that film. So I really needed this movie to be good, and I'm so thankful that it is. I loved this movie. there are a lot of things to talk about in terms of why this film is so good. I mean, I think you can't, while you can look at this film and as just a good superhero film, I think you can't take away from the fact that it is one of only 2 films with a budget of over $100 million, directed by a female director. So it's groundbreaking in that regards alone. Like, we've kind of got a glass ceiling being shattered here, as this film, with it being as good as it is going to open up the doors for more diverse voices in our storytelling, and specifically our blockbuster storytelling. I love that. But again, on top of all that, it's a damn good movie with a damn good character. One of the things that's so cool about Wonder Woman as a comic book fan is there are so many different iterations of her story. You look back at kind of her creation as this, I am the damsel who breaks my own bonds, as opposed to having someone break the bonds for me, written by this guy and his polyamorous lovers. Like, it's this incredibly progressive story that then becomes much more regressive over time during like the comics code and just all of that impact on the character. And then you've seen her over time just sort of go back into that, hey, I'm gonna just kick ass and just be this Amazonian badass that I was always meant to be. I love that we got to see that version of this character on screen. A lot of like some of Gail Simone's most recent comic book writings for the character, like, definitely made their way on screen. I love that. In terms of the film itself, you guys all kind of hit on this, but there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of light in this film. And when I say joy, like, and it's the same thing, I've brought this point up several times in past episodes. Like, I don't mean jokes. I mean, our superheroes are meant to be better than the worlds that they inhabit. These are characters who are meant to be hopeful and to help inspire us and to make us feel like, hey, no matter how shitty the world is, we've got something we can look up to. I mean, think about these characters as comic book characters. A lot of us use these characters as escapes for so long. To see these characters just become dragged through the mud and just depressed and joyless over the last few films, those aren't my superheroes. That's not my Batman. That's not my Superman. This is my Wonder Woman. One of the things that was so cool about this film for me is this reminded me a lot, in all of its strengths and even in some of its flaws, of one of the Phase 1 Marvel movies, like the first Captain America movie, the first Thor movie, etc. In that these are extremely character-focused films that are predominantly about kind of getting the character set up into this better world. And because we know that, like, this is Wonder Woman's origin story, so it's all set in the past. The stories that we're going to see going forward are all going to be set ostensibly in modern day, right? Like, they're all going to be Justice League era stories. This is a prologue. This is a preamble. But it's a damn good one, and it's a character-focused one. Even some of the same faults. When I think about the Phase 1 Marvel movies, I can say, I think that maybe the villains aren't as strong as the characters, as the heroes are. And I would say that's a criticism I would levy against Wonder Woman. But I think that that's okay. There's always a give and a take somewhere. And I think in this, with this particular film, they focused less on the villain's motivations to give Wonder Woman more chance to be on screen, to make the decisions she's making, to have the agency, to have those commanding scenes, to give you those like fist pumping moments that just make you want more. I'm okay. I can say that the faults, maybe the supporting cast, which was really cool, they needed a little bit more to do. The villain's a little forgettable. Maybe there's a couple of points where, especially some of the stuff in London, where it drags just a hair for me. But I think those are all necessary evils. So those are quibbles, those are faults, but they're ones that I think serve the greater good, which is letting Wonder Woman have more room to be Wonder Woman. This is an absolute must-see for comic book fans, for movie fans, or if you're just like a little bleeding heart feminist like myself, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of reasons to see this movie. Go do it right now.
All right, so that's 5. I know
5 for 5.
5 for 5 is a pretty strong recommendation from the blended cast of the Movie Bears podcast and the Comic Book Bears podcast. So definitely seems like we're all in agreement. If you haven't seen this yet, definitely go out and do so. I think we're just going to go ahead and go to spoilers, honestly, at this point. I think most people that are listening have probably already seen the movie. So how do you guys feel about that? Are you on board?
Yeah, let's
Absolutely.
get it.
Yes.
There's more to talk about.
That's right. All right. Then here we go. Spoilers will be fair game after several seconds of awkward stalling to give you time to hit pause if you're listening on digital tape delay, or step away if you are listening live. But we have reached that point. Spoiler time. Do it. And to kick things off, I mentioned that I had like a third piece of my sort of Wonder Woman homage. And it arrived from Amazon moments before the show opened. I mean, Themyscira moments before.
Of course.
Guys,
Amazonia.
Amazonia, nice.
Oh, nice.
I have been loaned the fabled lasso of truth, and I'm gonna use it on Jim because I want to know what he really thinks. Jim, you are now lassoed. You are compelled to tell the truth.
What was I hiding? I wasn't hiding anything. I was already telling the truth.
Did the CGI slugfest that this movie became in the last like 40 minutes detract at all from the other really great stuff?
No, not really. I will say that among my nitpicks is the overuse of the speed ramping slow-mo in fight scenes. I knew that was going to be an issue going in because I saw the trailers and it was all over the trailers. It's an overused cliche for action movies, and I think it's kind of a crutch. It kind of makes the action look more stylized, and that's cool for this movie. But that's a personal preference thing for me. I'm not saying it was badly done. I'm just saying that it's like I wish they had thought of something else to do to make these fight scenes look cooler than every fight scene. I know the camera's going to slow down here because she's going to throw a punch. It's a nitpick, okay. And the other thing is, I loved the interplay between Wonder Woman and Steve in this movie. Look, I've known Chris Pine. Chris Pine's a very talented dude, and we've seen him in the Star Trek movies. We saw him in that. We saw him do comedy in. Was it Into the Woods? Where he did some of that comedy stuff that was kind of a highlight of that movie.
And don't forget, we also know he's good at riding motorcycles in every movie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's written in his contract that he has to ride a motorcycle in every movie that he does. So yeah, he got out the motorcycle for this one too, which was awesome. But yeah, I love the interplay between them, but I love that it was, to me, it seemed more of a deep friendship than romantic.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really care so much for when, like, at some point in the movie, they go to it's intimated that they go to bed together,
right?
And I don't know if that's a plot thing because there's going to be a Wonder Baby coming up. I don't know. I don't know what the thing is, but
Wonder Baby.
He put his clay in.
I didn't buy into all of that. I know he's a red-blooded, I think, American, right? Even though he's working for the British spy, and she's a very beautiful woman. I just thought it kind of worked counter to what this movie was going for, to have her, like, I don't know, kind of give in to him and go to bed with him. It just seemed a little weird for me. Maybe that's what the audiences want to see. It is lighting up.
I got it to work.
Oh, that's awesome.
It lights up. Sorry.
All right.
So does that mean
What's that?
So that means that was the truth that we just heard. Like,
that was the truth.
It was totally.
Unadulterated truth
liked,
from Jim. Yeah,
I like this. You guys know me, right? I'm not a big superhero movie fan, but this movie, I think, got the most out of the genre. I don't think it busted the genre at all. I don't think it subverted the genre at all.
Nope.
But I think what it did was it did it right for the genre, and I appreciate it for that. And I enjoyed the heck out of this movie.
And I'm glad that it didn't subvert the genre. Like, I think that it would have been very easy for this film to say, well, this is the female superhero movie. Like, let's do something different. Let's tell this story in a very different way. But this story got to, and again, it's the fact that it played in the same lane as some of the kind of the heroic male superheroes that we've seen before, is a testament to the strength of Wonder Woman as a character, that she can play in that same arena, and the storytellers not feel compelled to have to and I don't know how better to say this, like over feminize the
Make
story.
it different, or just make it different. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like over estrogenize it a little bit.
Yeah, like this could just be Wonder Woman kicking ass straight down the lane. That's what we needed. That's what we got.
So speaking of Wonder Woman kicking ass, I want to throw this to our Comic Book Bears podcast guys now. Steve and Bill, you guys were talking earlier about like that moment where Wonder Woman jumps into Batman v Superman. We've got that like theme. That was super kick ass. Do you feel like the promise of that scene carried over successfully to this movie? Did it work for you? Was it sustainable here? What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. It was that scene in the 2 hour and 12-minute format. You know, it was the best of that movie expanded. I'm just thinking of some of the things that were said, and I just there's a slight point I'm going to disagree with you on, Will, where you mentioned that you felt this had a spiritual connection to some of the early Marvel films. And for me, this feels like if it does have a spiritual precedent, it's the first Superman film by Richard Donner. Not necessarily in the tone, because that movie's just at points just far too, I don't want to say too jokey, but far more jokey than this one.
Goofy.
But the first Superman film has a very interesting structure in that it's an uneven 3-act story, with Krypton, Smallville, and then Metropolis.
Right.
And what you have here is effectively the same thing. You have Krypton with Themyscira, you have London as Smallville, and then the front as Metropolis. And I don't know how deliberate a choice that was, but it seems to work in introducing a character. I think, and I would be interested to see if other films use that template, whether deliberately or just through osmosis. Going back to your question. Yeah, I do think it fulfilled the promise of what we saw. And
how about you, Steve?
Yeah,
I think so. I think the theme, like the music theme itself, really did kind of connect those scenes. It's instantly recognizable. At this point, that music is instantly recognizable. I think that for years to come, people are going to hear that musical cue and they're going to think Wonder Woman. Which up to this point, the only thing that's ever said Wonder Woman was maybe the old theme song from the 1975 show. Or 1977 show.
Is that because it actually had the words Wonder Woman?
Wonder Woman! Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
it does the same thing. It just goes.
Yeah, it's Wonder Woman with like a really weird wavelength. I don't know. But I think the action clearly was very much in line with what we've come to expect from superhero films. And I actually appreciate that. Like I think Will mentioned, Bill's mentioned, I don't want a Wonder Woman movie to be, to be a kind of film that just says, oh, well, we don't want to have any fighting or violence because that's too masculine. We want to make this like she talks down like the militaries on all sides of the Great War. It didn't do that. It was, she is a warrior. And the fact that she has a lot of masculine traits does not defy the fact that she is a woman. And she's a woman who is ignorant of man's world, but also above and beyond it. And she doesn't lose that completely. There's, obviously there's that one point in the film where she believes she's killed Ares, and is talking with Steve, and Steve's telling her that didn't end the war. I mean, come on, like there's all these soldiers out here with tons of poison gas, and they're going to kill thousands of people, and just you stabbing one dude is not going to end the entire war. Of course, this is what eventually happened. She stabs one dude and everything ends.
Great scene. It's a great scene, by the way.
It is. I think at that moment, and of course the earlier moment when she sees what happens to the Belgian village, after she's, they've saved them, and then it ultimately comes to nothing because that's the destructive nature of war. I think that she really does understand that, and I really applaud Gal for being able to express that very well, but also for Patty for not making it overly hokey. I mean, there was a lot of potential there for it to just fall flat, and I don't think it did. And it could have very well gone south, and then you're like, who cares, whatever. But and actually, I did want to kind of bring that up and ask the question for you guys. One thing that we kind of look at as comic book bears is, we look at the superheroes, but we also look at their villains. And what do you feel about the villains in this film? It's almost like, from my perspective, they were less important to what Gal does, what Wonder Woman does, and how it affects the greater picture.
As I think it should be in this movie.
Yeah.
In this movie, this is a Wonder Woman movie. This is about that character primarily. A little bit about Steve too, but it's not really about. I mean, you need a villain to drive the story, but you don't want the villain story to overshadow your hero story. Now that you've established your hero, in the next movie, now you start bringing on the stronger villains and see what she can do. But I think it wasn't a strong villain, and I understand Will's little nitpick on some of these movies that the villains aren't that great, and I totally agree. But in this movie, I think in these origin stories, I don't think you really want too strong a villain.
And I mean, I definitely see that for sure. But I think when you've got like Ares, the god of fucking war, like, I don't know, like he became a Michael Bay Transformer at one point.
When he can't see a sword that's right there in front of him.
Right. What Wonder Woman? Yeah, don't even get me started. And for me, I don't know. I like having the villain a little bit less prominent. Like we don't need as much. But at the same time, he kind of became a little bit of a laughable villain for me. And if I have one complaint about this movie, that's probably it. Just like reading some of Wonder Woman's interactions with Ares and some of the comics and stuff, I don't know. It just felt a little cookie cutter villainy, and I would have liked to have had more of like the mythology of Ares brought in. They tried to do a little bit about it with like the Zeus story and all that stuff, but I think I would have liked a little bit deeper Ares goodness.
I think for me, and I think this kind of goes back to the point I was making before, like, I think, yes, I can say that it's one of the faults, one of the nitpicks, that the villain was the weakest part of this movie, but I would also say that that's one of the strengths, in that we didn't have a lot of time to develop the villain, but again, we got all of that extra screen time to devote to Diana, and that's where it needed to be here. I didn't feel personally as slighted on not seeing as much on Ares, because I think that at least with the story that they were telling here, it's a fairly straightforward story. Ares is angry, Ares smash. What I wanted to see more of, actually, the character that I felt like I guess I got a little bit of I was teased a little bit on, and maybe wanted to explore more than the film did, was Dr. Poison.
Yeah.
I thought that she was going to have a little bit bigger role than she ended up having. And who knows what the future holds for that particular character. But
she's going to be in the female-led version of Phantom of the Opera next.
Wow.
But that was a character I actually thought, you could maybe even remove. I don't know. There's a certain point where I don't want to try to rewrite the movie, because I think this movie is fantastic and I love it. But you probably could have taken a little bit of the Ares stuff out and maybe played Dr. Poison up a little bit more, just to have, I don't know, just kind of like that female versus female.
Yeah, I would have liked to know more about her. Actually, she was kind of interesting, and she seemed like a conflicted character, which interests me. They just didn't explore it, and maybe they did, and it didn't make the final cut of the movie. I don't know, but again, the more we got of her story, maybe the less we would have got of something else that we liked.
So, Bill, it's been a little while since we've heard from you. What do you think on Steve's question here?
On Steve's question, let's refresh me, because we've got a little bit.
Well, just
bit
about
off
like
course.
how did you feel
About the villain?
these villains? Yeah.
Yeah. There were things about the depiction of Ares and the general that I really liked. I love that Ares used organic material to make his like became somewhat of a Michael Bay transformer in execution. I think in intent, I thought that was a novel thing. It's a little hard to reconcile this villain being a middle-aged British dude that I could probably take out in one punch. Me, you know. So
Poor man's Mycroft.
Yeah. So there was good one. So there were some elements of that creeping in, but I think you guys have all hit it. You know that there was so much strength on the end of the heroic side that in some ways it's not necessarily the villains, but the predicament that they're in that's the battle. And I think there are some films where that really works, like here, and some films where you don't have a story without a very strong villain.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you compare,
this film was well constructed enough that you could not hit certain marks and it would still be a great cinematic experience. And I think that's what we had here.
well, I think if you compare this to, say, another, early 20th century hero film, Captain America is probably the closest, where he's going from a eager weakling to a superhero out on the front, the European front for World War II. But in there, the villain is clearly Red Skull. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Captain America, but the villain is clearly Red Skull and Hydra, and what they're doing.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Is you
already spoiled Batman versus Superman.
Wonder Woman kicked ass.
He spoiled it.
You're gonna tell me that the black chick's a dude.
But in this one, I think they do an excellent job of making sure that you understand, because that's what the whole point of what Wonder Woman's supposed to understand, is that the real villain isn't some CGI, super god monster. It's people. It's humanity itself.
It's war itself.
It's war itself.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
This kind of fighting. And that's why I think that the conversation between her and Steve Trevor, right before everything goes crazy in that airstrip was really important, because at that point she realizes it doesn't matter if Ares is kind of manipulating people, and that's where I think, for those of you who've read it, the New 52 Azzarello run, that's what Ares is. He's some kind of rickety old man who just kind of hangs out and influences the people around them to make them more combative.
Right.
But
you had just mentioned the relationship with Steve Trevor, and Jim, I can see where you're coming from of this not being a great romance story, or however you put it. But I also saw this in some ways, as I said, that it works as a romance, in that this was a tale of a first love. Your first love usually isn't the one that sticks, and whether it's Diana's introduction to man himself, or it's Steve actually taking a person seriously, I think a lot of that really, really worked, apart from the suggestion that that they banged, and there were so many scenes between them where there was such a sweetness, the dancing with the snow coming down, and just apart from the film getting Diana right, the film also got the essence of Diana so right. In scenes that she wasn't even in. I'm thinking my favorite bit of the film, this is something we can only talk about with spoilers, is right towards the end where the chief hugs the German soldier. And to me, that's the essence of what Diana brings about in people, what she inspires in people. That wonderful little scene where Charlie is wondering whether he has any value to keep going with the mission, and she just says with just a very slight but perfect smile on her face, "But Charlie, who's going to sing to us?" These really wonderful little moments, and I'm mentioning these characters, and we had such strong performances. I mean, Robin Wright, my God!
Oh wow! Her accent was a little off, but other than that, it was. It was
Yeah,
good to have.
it's not.
It was
It
good.
is not. Yeah, it is not an effective. I know a Themyscirian accent. Yeah.
Oh my God, Robin Wright. Like I saw like I hate to quote other people's tweets, but as soon as I walked out of the theater, I saw someone mention something effective. Whichever film executive snatches up Robin Wright and puts her in the Taken, but with a female lead movie is
Yeah.
just
Oh,
print money.
yes,
I
yes,
want to
yeah.
see just
yes.
Robin Wright, a la this
Yeah.
movie, just kicking all kinds of ass.
Oh
It's
God.
it's definitely good to know that, like, you know, Claire Underwood has a job after House of Cards ends.
Training of people how to use a bow staff, apparently.
Hey, she's got all these hidden skills apparently. So
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you guys about what you think the importance of this film might entail down the road, because we've been talking about this being groundbreaking, but there also seems to be a lot of real life elements that are affecting the reaction to this film. I think the best example of that is Star Wars in 1977. That was the movie that made America forget about Vietnam. And we're in this situation where we've been screwed by an electorate that voted for continuation of a patriarchy, and the most ill-equipped members of that patriarchy in charge. And it almost feels to me that I do think this is going to be a film that we're going to see good box office for about 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think this is a 1 week and down. Some of it's the competition, some of it isn't. I think this is going to be a situation like a 300 or something where the audience actually may not necessarily build beyond the numbers from the first weekend, but it'll be pretty steady. And the word of mouth on this is, apart from Get Out, probably the best that we've had this year.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what you guys think, because I think we may be seeing this film in the coming years through a filter that isn't just its cinematic experience. And, that may be wishful thinking on my part, but, to see, the box office is 53% women, and that never happens with an action film. And I do think that this may be not necessarily a game changer, but I think it's it might be hitting something that we need right now. The hope that we need right now. Yeah,
I think it does break some ground, as we mentioned already, in terms of we have women, a strong female lead. Not that we haven't had that before, but we really haven't had it in superhero movies before. We have a story that's directed by a great filmmaker who happens to be a woman. So this movie definitely sets a bar, and it's awesome that the DC got out of this first, because fans have been after Marvel for a long time to get their act together in terms of female superheroes, and we've heard about it. We've got is it Captain Marvel or something like that? And maybe we could have some others down the road. I think there's a Batgirl. Well, that would be DC, right?
DC,
right. But they're coming. I think they're coming, and this one sets the bar for those movies, and I'm glad it set it so high, because now these movies have something to shoot for. I mean, I got to tell you, I watched Brad's going to hate me for this, because I think he already didn't like that I commented on it, but we watched the Spider-Man trailer before this movie. And I got to tell you, man, at least by the looks of the trailer compared to what this movie ended up being, I just can't put the two in the same on the same playing field anymore. Yeah. We'll see what that movie ends up being. It's a totally different thing. I understand that, but this movie will set a bar, and I'm glad the bar has been set so high. And I don't know if that answers your question, Bill, or if I missed it, but
yeah. And not just cinematically either. I think that it's important to look like to Bill's point. Like, you always have to look at films, not just in the context of myself as a viewer, but you also have to look at them in context of whatever's happening, whether it be political landscape or even pop culture. Just things that are happening shape the way that we view movies. Obviously, we're in a very tumultuous slash defiant era of kind of American politics right now. Not just American politics, actually world politics too, where the much maligned identity politics are coming to the forefront. And I think that that's a good thing. This movie is Nevertheless She Persisted the movie, and I love it for that. I think that in a cultural climate where certain groups, whether any group that doesn't have power, whether it be female, racial minority, religious minority, the queer community, us here, I think that we need movies like this that help remind us that, yes, we have a fight ahead of us, and this fight is going to be ugly and it's going to be brutal, but there is hope that, we can get through this, the other side of it, and be stronger, be champions for our own causes. Like, this is what Wonder Woman was for me. She is sort of an exemplar, just of what hopefully we can all be in this weird, shitty political climate. So yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. I think that when we look back at this movie a few years from now, we're going to be thinking about it in terms of it's the huge air quotes feminist movie that came out the gates in the first year of the Trump administration. This is the movie that helped revitalize the DC cinematic universe and hopefully springboard it into something else. This is a movie that let us show that women can play at the same table as men in, kind of the, testosterone laden like superhero genre. This movie has sort of set a lot of standards and has planted its flags in a lot of places. And I mean, you can't help but be remembered for that.
Yeah. One of the things that, for me, in terms of this whole like female superhero movie thing, that I really enjoyed about Wonder Woman. You guys watch Supergirl, Bill and Steve? Okay.
Yep.
I love Supergirl, but it was a little painful in the early episodes of the first season when it's like, I'm a girl, I'm strong, I'm a strong woman that can do anything.
I will tell you
Look how powerful women can be. Solidarity, sister. Like, yes, that's an important message, but it was like cheesy and schmaltzy.
I'll punch you in the face.
How it did it, and I was a little afraid that this Wonder Woman movie was going to kind of do some of the same things, like hitting certain points, like too hard over the head. You know what I mean? I think it accomplishes what it does without even being like obvious or intentionally deliberate in a way. Like, when I watch this movie, I don't get the feeling, oh, they put that line in because they want to show that like women can be just as strong as men. It just felt to me like Diana's a kick-ass Amazon from this, far off secret island. She's in this world of man now. And, I mentioned earlier that like a little early on when she gets involved in like the world politics, right? Men are constantly telling her no. Whether it's Chris Pine, whether it's the British intelligence guy or whatever. Men are like, nope, you can't do that. No, you can't come in this room. No. And then they go to the front, and that continues, right? Chris Pine's like, no, you can't help those people. No, we don't have time, whatever. And finally, Diana's like, I'm just going to do what I want to do. I'm Wonder Woman. Like, she just jumps into it, and she gets into the mix. And now, you have this no man's land. They haven't been able to gain an inch of ground in a year or whatever, right? She's just like does her thing. And now we're having like happy dancing and singing under the snow. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it's like, in a way, it's an allegory for like, if men had listened and equally partnered with women, so much more could have been accomplished a long time ago, and so much more can be accomplished now. And so I think this movie is just a shining example of that.
What's funny that you had mentioned that the two people who were partnering very equally in this film were, of course, Danny Houston's German general character and Dr. Maru, or Dr. Poison. They both very much believed in their vision. And he was an equal partner with her, and they were going to be extremely successful in murdering thousands of people, which is, I guess, great for them. But what's really interesting is Wonder Woman has been there She's 76 years old. I mean, she looks great, but she's been around since 1941, and so she's been a character who's been present for some very important periods in American history, specifically American history, because she is an American character who, of course, has over the years has transcended that and is now internationally recognizable. I mean, she was a UN ambassador for a hot minute, before people realized that she was a fictional character. But if you think about it, in this film, there's a very small, very quick line, and you can easily miss it, from Etta Candy when they're talking. When she's doing her clothing change at Selfridges or wherever she was, and she's like, "How do you fight in this?" It's like, well, we could fight. And Etta says like something about like, and we could fight for the right to vote and blah blah blah. And if you miss that line, you realize that she is in England at a time when women didn't have the vote. That, in the US, women didn't really get the vote until a couple of years after World War I, I think like a year after World War I. In 1941, when Wonder Woman was created as a character, it was only a few years. It was 20-some years since women were allowed to vote in the United States, and she was a strong female character. Like, that's shocking. That as a character, she's shocking that she would come along at that time period. Gloria Steinem made use of her, back when she started Ms. Magazine. I mean, she has been a symbol for resistance, for change, for female empowerment, for, showing and highlighting what women have the power to do. And yet, for 76 years, or 74 years, I guess, she was never on the big screen. People, thought that there would be no point in even attempting something like this in theaters, that people just wouldn't care, that they wouldn't really respond very well to her. Like the whole argument that's been going on with the Marvel movies is, well, Black Widow, she's a really popular character, but can she hold her own movie? Probably not. They'll never make any money. And I think it's important now that Wonder Woman has come out, and that she is, and I'm glad it's a successful film, because that means that we might get more. Yes. But also, to me, it's important that the first film of this type is a Wonder Woman film.
Definitely.
That here she is again, from 1941 until now, she's been there as a symbol for something that is outside of what we expect for a superhero, for a popular character with children, a popular character with nerds and geeks. Like it's just not something that could be done by any other character, and it just makes me so happy that Wonder Woman ended up being a wonderful film, and that is being portrayed in a way that I think resonates with people who either didn't know what to expect, were expecting the worst, or were extremely hopeful and hoping for the best. And I think it really kind of helps that.
Definitely. Well, I think that's fantastically put. I want to just apologize to our listeners real quick. We've been having a great conversation, and they have too. And normally we read those comments out as they're happening, but I want to catch up with some of those. One, we've got an awesome picture from one of our longtime listeners in Texas. Paul.
I love this man. I love this man so much.
I don't know if you can really see that, if it'll focus on it. Paul and Bill are making like the same like exasperated is Brad still talking face. So Paul, glad to hear from you. We got some comments as well from our friend Mick Jones, who says he loved the movie, feels like it maybe could have used a little editing, but wouldn't hold the extra minutes against it. He said he really wants those bracelets. Don't we all?
Leftover right.
That's right. Right. Also, William Riley says he happily loved it. He was happy with the change to World War I as a time period.
Yes.
William, I agree. I think it's just such a great setting for that. And it made for that beautiful, like, dancing in the snow, Charlie singing at the piano scene, which was like one of the best scenes of the whole movie for me, I felt. So
I'm puzzled.
Why? Why are you puzzled by that?
I'm a little puzzled why. First of all, why do you think they made the change? Why do you think it was a good change? And why do you think they don't sing during World War II?
I know one of the big reasons for the
Question.
change. One of the big reasons for the change is one of the major themes of this movie really had to do with the fact that, like, once Diana started exploring the world, she started to realize that, like, I mean, obviously, yes, there were good guys and there were bad guys, but there were two specific bad guys that were interfering with this armistice, right? So we really had a bunch of these, like, countries that were at war with each other, but were trying to figure out peace while you have these two outside forces that are affecting it. That particular storyline becomes a lot more difficult when you add Nazis into the mix. Like, it's a lot harder to have, like, kind of like, you know, let's negotiate the peace when you have plus Nazis. So I think that moving it to World War I just lets you get past that part of the storyline and focus just on what they wanted to tell.
So
here.
question, and maybe it's a nitpick, but from a history perspective, if it's World War I, are they Nazis at that point?
No, they're imperial.
Right. Okay.
No, the Nazis.
It was the German Empire.
So
Germans.
I only say that, Will, because for me initially I was a little confused. I was like, wait, is this Nazi Germany? Is this World War II? Is this World War I?
Okay.
So I was like trying to figure that out. And then once we got like to London and they were talking, I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
And I also think there was an aesthetic appeal there because it's in a lot of ways a forgotten war. Certainly cinematically. It seems that World War II is the easier go-to, and though that aligns with the history of the character, there were a number of fronts where I thought that worked really well, and plus this gives us an opportunity maybe for a Diana in World War II film down the road.
I mean, she can still punch Hitler.
Yeah.
I mean, there is still that possibility.
That's the movie I need next. I just see her punching the fuck out of her.
God.
I want a Vietnam era one.
Wait till Wonder Woman in the Gulf War, guys.
No, the Vietnam when she's in a white pantsuit and go-go boots.
Yeah.
Hey, we're not kidding.
At least,
We're not kidding.
We've seen her. What was the film? New Frontier, where she was in I think Korea.
Yeah.
And that was a very
Korea in the 1950s. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that World War I gave you the opportunity, and like you said, it doesn't complicate things with Nazis and, of course, what goes along with Nazis in World War II. Because with these bad guys, if you're looking at the Germans as being all evil, the Germans in World War I were not really evil. Nobody was really evil in World War I. They were all just kind of like, everybody's bad. Like, we got to fight them. We got to fight them. You actually do see this. You see the generals sitting around the table in one scene where they're trying to figure out, what's the best way to surrender, to have this armistice, to make sure that everybody gets home okay. Right. Because their
principal motivation is the welfare of their people.
Yeah. And although there is that scene, of course, that leads to one of the coolest parts of the movie where Diana, does her "I am no man," type thing as she rides the foxhole. There we're given the whole like German evil, they've enslaved and like killed all these people and stuff. Okay, well I'm gonna totally beat them for that. That can also be kind of attributed to Danny Huston's character and like because he would have been under command of that area at that point. And we know that he is an evil person acting independently because he wanted to do something to show, he wanted to slaughter everybody in this village to use them as an example for the gas this whole time, apparently. So, but I don't know. I think it was still a brilliant decision to do World War I. We don't get enough of that. It is the 100-year anniversary of World War I.
Right.
It's been going on since 2014 to 2018. We're going to have that time period where it's been 100 years, and of course there's nobody left who remembers it, unfortunately.
And there's a really good comment from William in chat who also says it also makes World War I gives a bit of a difference between this film and Captain America: First Avengers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when you factor that in as well, like I think what we've stumbled upon here is there's probably like 4 or 5 really solid reasons to make this a World War I story, each of which is fantastic. But when you put them together, it was just smart writing for a smart film.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, and then we're gonna.
I was just happy that they kept it in that era for pretty much the whole film, except for the film's framing device, right? So of her getting the picture, right? I assume that's current day,
right?
Yeah.
That they didn't force it to switch over to, any of the plot to switch over to current day, which I thought was a really smart choice. They've got more movies to go, to do that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I think the money that this movie makes is going to speak to a lot of kind of put to rest a lot of fears that kept us from getting this movie in the first place, right? Because movie executives were afraid to do this movie. Like, oh my God, who's going to go to see it? Men aren't going to go to see this,
Right.
And now with these numbers, they're like, oh my God, let's go, right? And Marvel's gonna probably amp things up.
Time to capitalize on that, I'd say. And speaking of capitalizing on things, my other complaint about this movie, Jim, I think you share it, is that this movie failed to capitalize on something it could have done. Where was the Linda Carter spin?
No
homage?
twirl.
There was a perfect
twirl.
opportunity. Perfect
Come
opportunity. When she's wearing that blue party dress and she runs out and jumps on the horse, she could have jumped and spun in slow motion as she jumped with the dress twirling off of her to reveal her costume. What the fuck?
There was a Linda Carter Wonder Woman reference in there, and I think they've brought it up since then in New 52 and Justice League War, the animated film, when she's getting ice cream.
Yeah, I love that.
My husband Jason turned to me and he was like, she's gonna say the line, and it was this ice cream is wonderful, you must be so proud. That was from the original pilot in 1970.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep.
I remember that.
But in terms of not having the spin or not having the invisible plane for the first time around, it's just sometimes you got to save your some good bits for later. It's like an old whore. You gotta space it out.
Oh my God.
Okay. And it lets her really put a stamp on this particular iteration of the character, and not necessarily feel like you're having to play a greatest hits. I think that you can put that in if you want to put that kind of throwaway joke, I think there's a good opportunity to do that in the next one. I think this film had so many delicate things that it had to balance that I could see where they wanted to just really focus on only things that were kind of on brand to this version of Wonder Woman.
Right. I love what you said there, Will, in terms of greatest hits, because I think what we have here is a great debut album.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's what you have here.
I hope we get more Wonder Woman movies so we can get to a greatest hits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, believe it or not, we've been talking for almost an hour and a half already, guys. How the time quickly flies. So we're going to move into some plugs as we look to wrap up the show. So I'd like to give you an opportunity, Bill, again, to let our listeners know where they can find your guys' show, as well as something you might want to plug.
Okay, well, can I pass it off to Steve because I'm always the one plugging? So I would just want to hear what my co-host, how he would present our podcast. Let me just hear that first.
Let's see how well Steve can plug it.
I'm the worst at plugs, so let's just say, if you enjoyed listening to Bill and myself yammer on incessantly, we do that constantly at Comic Book Bears. You can catch us on, any of your podcasting apps or, providers, iTunes, Stitcher, etc. At Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at Comic Book Bears Podcast as well. And we're also on the Twitter if you want to tweet at us at Comic Book Bears Podcast. But one of the things that we did right before Wonder Woman came out is we had a great episode where we sat down with our friends James Figueredo and Mark, and I've just forgotten his last name, so he's going to
Brad Taylor.
Brad Taylor, there we go. He's going to kill me. And we talked about our feelings of Wonder Woman and our impressions of it. So if you want to catch it, I think it's the last one on our feed where we just talk about our love of Wonder Woman. So.
Right. The easiest way to do that, if you're not familiar with our cast and you haven't subscribed, is just go to comicbookbears.com. It leads you right to our RSS feed. Yep. And again, the episode that Steve mentioned is one we're pretty proud of. We wanted to have an episode out in time for the movie, but we knew we couldn't connect it with a review of the movie. And I think if people have watched this film and don't have any familiarity with Wonder Woman as a comic book character, I think what we've done with this episode is provided a pretty succinct history of the character, of how she has changed with the times, of what we think are good story arcs and graphic novels that they can go to if they want a good Wonder Woman story in comic book form. And we also discuss her particular appeal to the queer community. So it's as I said, I think it's really a good episode if you want to take what you've seen on the screen and move it over a little bit more. So there's the plug for our show. If I can plug something else,
Please do. Plug away.
Since I'm on a movie podcast, I'm sure you guys are all in the same boat. That Netflix queue keeps growing and growing and never seems to diminish. And there's movies that you intend to see, and then 4 years goes by, and you're like, oh my God, this is a 2013 film.
It's on YouTube by then.
Yeah. Well, a film over the weekend that I finally had a chance to watch was Lovelace from 2013. Which was a story of Linda Lovelace, the star of Deep Throat, and her relationship with her husband and the abusive relationship with her husband. And one reason that I didn't automatically, I think it had a super short theatrical run, like 1 week in a couple of theaters. Will, I know you're really on top of this. Was this one of the films where they attempted doing the theatrical release and the home video at the same time?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure when this one hit those two things, but I'm not quite sure on its distribution cycle.
Well, what I saw was a really effective film. It had two leads who I really don't care for in most films, Amanda Seyfried and Peter Sarsgaard. I've seen them be terrible in good films, and I'm not a fan of either. But they really executed very well in the lead parts of Linda Lovelace and Chuck Traynor. A really good supporting cast. Sharon Stone is unrecognizable as Linda Lovelace's mother, and it has a really interesting storytelling device in basically taking a narrative so far and then restarting it. It was a really interesting structure. I know it's weird for a queer man to recommend a film about straight porn, but it's a very effective story of somebody who was very important to American society for a time period. Whether it be from being the face of the golden age of porn, or later on, and identifying some of the truly bad things associated with that industry. And if you enjoyed that, you can also go to a great documentary called Inside Deep Throat. But I love being surprised by a film, and 2013's Lovelace really did that.
Nice. So, yeah. Very cool.
Steve, and it's on Netflix. It's easy to access. So
awesome.
Go for it.
Steve, did you have a plug?
Oh gosh. Other than the show.
All right.
Actually, it just started on, I believe, Showtime, and it's called I'm Dying Up Here. It's a television series about the stand-up scene in 1970s Los Angeles. It has a lot of wonderful actors and actresses that you might recognize. I'm not going to list them all off because there's a ton of them. But the plot itself is wonderful. If you like stand-up, you'll like this show because a lot of the characters do partial sets. So, part of the show actually takes place with them on stage doing their sets. But it's more about the relationships and the interplay of a very cutthroat industry in the early 70s, where really there weren't a lot of venues for a stand-up comedian to hit it big. If you didn't get a nice big LP album that you were going to be selling at the record store, the only other opportunity for you was to star on Johnny Carson. And so it's about these people in LA who are close to the show. They're, just a couple blocks away from Burbank, where they could be, next to Johnny on the couch telling a couple jokes in front of the curtain, whatever. But they're still struggling. And it's a great show. I really recommend it. Just started, I think, this week. It's going to be, I believe, 10 episodes for the season. And you can catch it on Showtime or on one of the apps if you have a Showtime app with, I think Amazon does that, and Hulu too as well.
All right. Excellent. Thank you kindly. Will, what have you got?
Yeah, so this is part 2 of movies I watched on a plane. First of which, last week I plugged Tombstone on my flight to Tucson to visit all of you because of obvious reasons. But on the way back, I got a chance to catch up with the movie from last year that just didn't do a lot theatrically, even though it got a lot of critical praise. It's an animated feature called My Life as a Zucchini. This was one of the 5 films that was up for Best Animated Feature. And I gotta say, this movie is such a delight to watch. It's animation done with sort of like a claymation style. And it touches on some fairly, I don't want to say dark territory, but some serious stuff for a kid's movie. You've got this kid, he's like 9 years old. He goes by the name Zucchini, and his mother dies, and he's responsible for it. And so he ends up in this new foster home filled with other orphans, and he befriends this police officer, and he sort of has to deal with like his own guilt, and all of the other kids have their own issues. I mean, you don't go into the foster home, system without, the potential for a lot of potential issues. And all of these kids have their own things and baggage that they're bringing to the table. All of this in sort of a lighthearted kids movie. So it's called My Life as a Zucchini. You can rent it on Amazon right now. It's only like an hour and like 5 minutes. It's a very short watch, but it's really, really, really good for kids, adults, whoever. It's just a solid film.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Jim, how about you?
I finally caught up with a movie that's been on, we mentioned the Netflix queue and queue of movies. It's a movie called Days of Heaven. It's a Terrence Malick film from 1978. It's set in like pre-Depression U.S. In Texas, actually. It's a really beautiful film, kind of a tragic romance drama. About 3 migrant workers who moved from the city to work on a wheat farm. And it stars a really young Richard Gere. Of course, this movie was made in 78. So Sam Shepard. But the performances that stood out for me were the 2 female leads, Brooke Adams and Linda Manns, especially a young girl in that movie. Just really, it's grown to be one of the best films of the 70s and 80s era. It's still on many lists of the best movies of all time. Finally caught up with it. So glad I did. I caught it on Filmstruck for free because I have the Filmstruck service, but you can rent it on iTunes, I think, and maybe some other services. Malick has kind of taken a lot of hits lately, especially for some of his films, which we didn't really care for and kind of unfocused and stuff. This is a really good movie to go back and see that this guy, is really a great filmmaker and has the chops. It's got a beautiful Ennio Morricone score in this movie that I really fell for. It's called Days of Heaven. Go see it. It's definitely worth watching, at least, even if just for the cinematography. But this one actually has a pretty strong, really cool narrative, and it will bring you back in time to that time of migrant workers on farms. And I fell in love with this movie. It's called Days of Heaven. Check it out.
Excellent. Thank you. And I will wrap things up with just a quick plug for our own show. Maybe that's cheating a little bit, but because we do have some new folks that have come on board, a lot of folks don't realize that you can access most of our back catalog. Actually, that's not true. There's like 100 episodes that aren't on iTunes anymore, but they're still on Stitcher Radio. So Stitcher Radio, thanks for that. So definitely go back, check out our back catalog. We've been seeing you guys do some of that already, but if you are just now getting to films like Django Unchained or Silver Linings Playbook or Les Miserables, those are some of the first films that we reviewed that are actually getting some listens lately. I was kind of surprised to see that. So go back to our website or Stitcher Radio, iTunes, catch some back episodes, and then join us again next week. We'll figure out what we're going to do and get back to you. But guys, to help us close out real quick, Bill, where can people interact with you online, you personally, if you want them to?
Online, you can interact with me on the Book of Faces. My Twitter that I never use is @Bill Zanowitz. You can also reach out to me through the Comic Book Bears website or comicbookbears@gmail.com. A comic book I wrote is The Crime Fighter Inquiry, and you can go to the Crime Fighter, that's definitely 11:11 at night here. You can go to the crimefighterinquiry.com. Sorry, crimefighterinquiry.com if you want to purchase a copy of that or say hi to me. And in terms of saying hi to me in person, this isn't necessarily really a plug, but you're going to have the rarity. I know all three of you gentlemen were recently together. We're going to have 3 of the 4 together next week at Heroes Con in Charlotte, where Steve is from. We don't have an official presence, but one of our co-hosts, Brian Pittard, is hosting a queer comics panel on Friday afternoon. And just if you see us and you're a listener of this show and maybe become a listener of our show, just say hi, because just love to hear from you.
Awesome. I'm jealous of anyone who gets a chance to be there in person.
We'll be the hairy, middle-aged, bearded guys at the comic book convention. You can't mess us.
the only ones. Gotcha.
Yeah, the only ones, totally.
All right. Steve, where can people interact with you online?
Well, you can interact with me on Facebook at Stephen Worry. I'm one of them. I'm also on Twitter as one of many Steves. So clearly, there's plenty of me to go around. But yeah, I mean, those are the 2 main areas to really find me, or you can just find me through comicbookbears.com. Yeah, I mean,
awesome. Great.
Not easy to find. I haven't written a comic book though. Sorry, guys.
but you're still easy.
It's so easy.
Oh boy. Will, where can people interact with you?
All right. You can check me out on the usual channels. On Twitter, I am at Whatever Cove. I usually just post about movies there. So, hey, it's a good enough spot for it. I post about a lot more on my Facebook page, William Lindis. Just send me a message first before you send that random invite so I know who you are and how you found me. Finally, I'm on the Letterboxd site. You just search for me by name there, William Lindis. That's where I post all of my reviews, every film I have not ever watched, but every movie I've watched since 2012 is logged in that database. So friend me there and we can talk movies. I'd love to do so. All
right, Jim.
I don't tweet as much as Donald Trump does, but you can find me on Twitter at JJP Out West, all one word. And you can also find me on Facebook and Letterboxd under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right, excellent. And you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. There's only like 3 Brad Harrises on the entirety of Facebook. And you know what I look like if you're watching the podcast, so that should be easy. And if you're listening and you don't know, just look for the big, chub bear guy, because the other 2 are very skinny and bald, so they're totally not me. But like Will, send me a message first. I've heard from a few of you that way. Thank you. Glad to interact with you. One person sent me a message and said in all caps, "Private media has been unlocked," and sent a dick pic. It's not Growler, so that was a little weird, but nice dick, I guess. Thank you. But you can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro. Feel free to send me a tweet. We'd love to hear from you guys. We will talk to you all next week. Big thank you to Bill and Steve and the other folks from the Comic Book Bears podcast for loaning you guys to us. We appreciate you coming in and helping us review this comic related film. But hey, if there's ever a non-comic related film you want to join us for, let us know. We'd love to have you.
Can I make a pitch to include me on a classic film one? I would love to.
Sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Let's
if you go to my home, you will see a hell of a lot of Cary Grant on the walls. So.
Nice. Well, let's create maybe a little Facebook and we'll do some planning on that, because we'd love to get a classic film in so that we can stay true to Yeah, definitely. But we are out, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. To those of you who listened live and you were active in the live chat, William and Paul and Dave and everybody else, great hanging out with you guys. For those listening on digital tape delay, we love you too, but I just realized you can't see the heart shape I'm making with my hands. So never mind. Anyway, goodbye, everybody. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.